Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us today. We would like to welcome you to the fourth webinar in the MOps Unlocked series, where we focus on marketing operational challenges we regularly encounter when working with our clients. If this is your first webinar of our MOps Unlocked series, I'd like to give you a quick introduction to CRMT Digital. We are a marketing operations consultancy that helps B2B companies unlock value from their marketing technology investments. We support most best-of-breed B2B marketing platforms like Marketo, Eloqua, HubSpot, Pardot, but we also understand the wider technology landscape, including CRM systems, BI tools, and many, many more. But whilst we love the nuts and bolts of the marketing engine, we also know it is ultimately about people. How people operate all those shiny tools is what truly matters, and that is definitely true of what we will cover today. My name is Len, and I'm Consultancy Director at CRMT Digital, and I have the honor of working with some really clever people with a passion for the field of marketing operations. And it's my job to make sure they can deliver their best work. So, what are we doing today? Today we will talk about marketing technology audits. Why is this important? Modern businesses accumulate marketing technology over time, and the tendency is towards ever greater complexity. Systems are often configured based on immediate needs instead of long-term goals, and over time, this will start to hold you back. Sooner or later, someone within your organization is going to propose, let's do an audit of our technology stack. And in principle, this is an excellent idea, but before you jump into it, there are good ways and bad ways to do it, and there are some really common mistakes that people make. And ultimately, that could mean you are not getting the value from it that you were expecting. Our marketing technology audit framework helps businesses identify whether the present setup aligns to the priorities for marketing and the needs of the wider organization, and whether the tech stack is set up optimally. And today I will take you through our approach, and hopefully it will help you to get started. In today's session, we'll go through the 5 steps that we go through when we do an audit for our customers. We'll talk a little bit about some common objectives for audits. We'll talk about the example deliverables that we associate with those objectives. We'll talk about the roadmap and how you can get started with some common tips as well. So before we get into that, I just want to touch on where do people often go wrong. So first of all, what you need to be careful with is to focus too much on listed features. So rather than looking at your tech stack as a bunch of technologies with a list of features, think about it as a technology stack that has to do things for you. And sometimes the technology that you have might in theory have a certain capability, but you as an organization have not deployed them. So make sure you don't fist the features, but focus on the actual things that it does for your business. The absence of objectives. So make sure that there are clear objectives for the audit. There are many different reasons why you might want to audit your tech stack. There are many stakeholders in the business that might have a different idea of what's important. So make sure that you clarify that before you get started. And this kind of ties into the lack of clarity on stakeholders. So make sure you understand who your main stakeholders are, what they want from an audit. And then there's the expectations on output. So what are you actually going to show them at the end of this exercise? And they need to be able to say, this is going to work for me or not. So a lot of these are common mistakes for any complex project, but given the amount of functions that have an interest in what you do now, it is even more the case for a marketing technology audit. So what are the steps that you need to go through when you start doing your audit? The first step is identifying your stakeholders and their objectives. So who are the people asking for the audit? Is it your idea? Or does it come from somewhere else? Avoid serving everyone at the same time, as you will end up pleasing no one. For example, if it is your leadership that has asked for it because they want to save money, what you will need to do is fundamentally different from when it is your sales organization asking you to support them better. Neither examples are wrong, but their expectations will be very different. So Make sure to agree with your stakeholders what the objectives for the audit are before you start. Second, work with your stakeholders to document their use cases. So what do they need from your marketing engine, and make that concrete and get it signed off. Also, make it clear with your stakeholders what the output will be for the audit. You don't have to ask them for approval on this one, as you will need to work with the results, but you want to make sure they are not surprised with the format of the end result. And it would be quite specific on this, as there are a lot of different opinions about what this should be. And then thirdly, analyze the data and the systems. Of course, this is a bit of the meat of the project, but unless you have considered the previous steps, you're not going to get out of it what you want. And then there's 4, identify and document the gaps that you found when you reviewed your tech stack against your use cases in the 3rd step. It could be there are tools you are actually missing, but more likely we're talking about how you can optimize the use of your current technology to meet the requirements you have set yourself. And 5, finally, it is about turning this into a plan. It does not end with some sort of agreement internally of what the priorities are, but it ultimately means that we need to make sure that we can do something with it. We don't want this output to get filed away, never to be seen of again. So take your findings and build a roadmap for your marketing operations team that delivers on the biggest priorities of the organization. So what are some common objectives for an audit? So first is cost and efficiency. When as a marketing function, you are asked to do more with less and review your technology stack against that, you need to look at your technology stack and your supporting processes as well. So licenses themselves can be very expensive, but even more so is the cost of ownership of any given tool. And what that means is that anything you can do to make it more efficient is time well spent. And then there's the customer journey. So this is basically about where the gaps are in the customer journey. So where do people start to engage with you, and what happens to that information, and do we make sure that the follow-up actions are as you would expect. And this is a very important one that's probably not, doesn't get done often enough. Then thirdly, data strategy. So how can we make sure we make the most of the data you already have, and what can we do to improve it? So we're talking about data strategies like enrichment, maybe acquisition, all those types of things. So how can we make the most use of the data that we already have? ABM enablement. So is your tech stack ready to support ABM at scale? It is very much possible to do ABM without any supporting technology, but as soon as you want to scale it, technology becomes quite crucial. So looking at your technology stack and check whether you're ready to deliver on that objective is a very good idea. And then there's sales enablement. So how do we improve insight for sales and improve and accelerate their results? They might have requirements that you want to meet on that front. Reporting and insight. So how mature is your marketing reporting infrastructure, and how can we resolve your blind spots? So you're capturing a lot of data. How can we make sure that we turn it into insights? There are some really common things that everyone wants to be able to report on. So you kind of should be able to come up with a list of things that you are currently lacking and where you need to work on. And then there's probably one of the most common audits that we have to do, which is around compliance. So GDPR, but also a lot of the other different legislative frameworks out there when it comes to marketing and sales. So we're talking about consent management, we're talking about the privacy policies and how that feeds through your technology stack. And especially when you're talking about a lot of different tools, which is very likely the case, this can become quite complicated. These are by no means all the objectives that you can think of. There are many other reasons, but it is important to clarify what the objective is so that you can turn that into some really, really solid use cases. So once you've identified the true objectives of your audit, you can start mapping that against those, start mapping use cases against those objectives. So the things that you want your technology stack to do for you. So once you've done that, you need to start thinking about the deliverable. So the ultimate result should be a roadmap, but the first thing you will likely need to deliver on are some clearly agreed objectives, as I mentioned, and the use cases defined against those objectives, right? Then how do you benchmark the capabilities against each of these use cases? Some sort of inventory. Hopefully you have that in place already, but you might not do. A technology inventory that covers all the technology you are either responsible for or that is crucial to your success as a marketing function. A visualization of your technology stack. This can take the form in many different shapes. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's definitely a good one when you want to start explaining your roadmap. And then there's the list of recommendations that are focused on your objectives. That's hopefully the thing that you can then turn into the roadmap, which is the most important thing, ultimately the thing that you want to settle on. So this is the end result, essentially a list of challenges that you want to meet over time. So use cases, what could that look like when you're trying to document those? What we would normally say is that you probably best to capture them in a simple spreadsheet, but turn them into stories, things that everyone can understand. Narratives, stories. So when you're talking about account identification and augmentation, as you can see in this example, try to make that more explicit. For example, acquire new accounts and provide the capability to enrich account details and relevant account knowledge to support effective engagement. Business intelligence might be the use case, but the story might be collate and exploit actionable insight to support targeting, segmentation, and marketing performance. Very often you'll have multiple stories against each of these, so it doesn't have to be one, but it might be multiple. Content identification and augmentation. So acquire new contacts and provide the capability to enrich content details and relevant content knowledge to support effective engagement. So again, it's just some of those example stories that you can map against use cases and ultimately objectives. So document all those so that everyone knows what you are going to be looking for when you're looking at your technology stack. Then there's the repository. Now, if you're lucky, this already exists, but you'll likely have to adjust this slightly to meet the needs of your audit. But what you would expect to be in a repository is, of course, a list of all the technologies that are there in your business, but also what the primary use case is and what the secondary use cases are. Also consider capturing some of the administrative elements like business ownership, contract duration and expiry dates. If this is the first time that you're creating a repository like this, it's a really good idea, very handy tool just to make sure that you can manage all the different contracts that you are responsible for. Once you've done that, you want to be able to map out each of these technologies against the use cases that you identified. Where do all those technologies support each of those use cases? Essentially, it will become a matrix that shows what each of those individual pieces of technology do for your organization. This way, you can identify which of the core use cases are not met through your technology stack. And remember that in this exercise, we're not talking about what is on the feature list of each individual platform. We need to know whether the current setup actually supports a given use case. It might be it is not switched on or not properly integrated or simply not used. There are lots of reasons why it is not working right now. Once you have established that, a follow-up action is to identify which pieces of technology you already have that could meet your use cases. And in the process, identify where are the true gaps in the feature set of your tech stack. All of that is important information when you come to turning this into a roadmap. It might be that there are gaps because you don't have the kit to support it, but it might be that you need to enable your current stack or your team to use particular capabilities. There are different things and they're equally as important. Then there's the visualization. At some point, your stakeholders will likely expect you to explain the outcome of the audit and the recommendations. Whilst your matrix in a spreadsheet format is a much better reflection of what is missing, probably, Conversations do become a lot easier if you have a visual format of your stack, and that can take the shape of many different formats, and that really depends on the objectives of your audit. If you are auditing your stack from the perspective of customer experience, it makes sense for it to be some sort of user journey map. If you're looking at data strategy as an objective, a visualization that shows the way data flows between systems is more important. If you're looking at your stack to identify compliance gaps, a consent management workflow makes the most sense. In some cases, you might need more than one type of visualization. Again, when you start out on your audit, it is a good idea to clarify to your stakeholders what they can expect in this respect. Ultimately, you will want to turn this into a roadmap, and this can take many formats. You can work in 2-week sprints. You can you work with months. Ultimately, you want to plan the different challenges that you want to overcome against a time. Could be 6 months, could be 12 months. It does not matter. But you want to have something that actually shows you how you can deliver on each of these challenges over time, so that you have a proposal that you can make to the rest of your business. So let's look at some of the things that we want to, the objectives, and how we can turn those into use cases. When we're looking at reporting and insights, there are many different types of reports. There might be operational reports. There might be reports that show you how well you're doing when it comes to reach from your marketing. You might want to look at your funnel, campaign performance, or account funnel. Within each of those types of reports, there are some really valid things that you might probably want to report on, and each of them can become a use case if you like. So for example, if you want to be able to report on data health, then things like I want to be able to report on data completeness is a perfectly valid use case. If you want to look at something from a reach perspective, like for example, how are people engaging with my content? You know, does it come through? Is it? We're talking about website, or we're talking about social, email, and so on. Can I split that by region, source, and account? That's a completely valid thing to ask. But that, again, that can become a use case for you when you want to look at your funnel. What are the conversion rates by region, by source? Again, it can become a very valid use case, something that you want to be able to report on. Campaign performance. A good example is how many net new contacts are being created by a particular campaign. How many, what's the revenue or the pipeline generated by that campaign? Can I split that by region? Can I split that by source? And so on. Or account reporting. So how many MQAs, how many SQAs, how many deals are won from the marketing efforts that I'm making. Each of them can become a use case, if you like, from a reporting perspective. When you're talking about maturity in this respect, very often reporting starts with PowerPoint presentations and Excel reports, very, very ad hoc, but hopefully over time that will become a little bit more mature. So your reporting becomes, semi-automated, maybe using a BI tool, but with data that's delivered on a schedule. Maybe at some point you start looking at actually integrating it into a data lake of some sorts. Again, each of these steps can become use cases that help you move up the maturity level, the maturity curve of your reporting infrastructure. Ultimately, you want to be able to show that you have, you have all your data in one sort of data warehouse, and you have an agreed set of dashboards that show you how you're delivering on your company KPIs. That's the ultimate aim in most cases. And then there's compliance as an objective. So some example use cases, for example, for data intake could be, do we have a form strategy in place that allows us to manage our forms and make sure the intake is of sufficient quality? Do we have a documented process for event lead capture? And can we track where those leads come from? Or for usage, have we documented how we track users when they engage with us? And is that captured in our policies, and is it compliant? For maintenance, how do we make sure we maintain consent and track that accurately? And what our policies and consent expiry, what are they? Can we actually show what that looks like? Do we audit our data accuracy? Do we have governance processes in place for access to marketing data? So all of these are very valid questions when you start auditing your tech stack for compliance. Also, when it comes to disposal, do we have a process in place for deletion requests? And how do we manage archiving and purging of data? When it comes to GDPR, you're not supposed to hold on to data forever. So is there something in place? Are there policies in place, and are there processes in place to make sure that you're not doing that? In terms of the process for actually doing an audit like this, make sure that you are very clear on which systems you're going to be looking at. Because this is a legal type thing, so you want to make sure that you're actually looking at the right types of pieces in your technology. Then, of course, you're doing the systems audit. You'll look at the data as a structure, but don't forget, you also need to look at the processes that underpin this. For example, when you're looking at an event lead capture process, that is crucial to make sure that the data is correct and you can ultimately support compliance. So that doesn't just, you're not just looking at systems, you're also looking at the processes that underpin it. And ultimately, again, as with everything, turn this into recommendations, and you build out a roadmap to become compliant. And then ABM. So if you want to, if your objective of an audit is to see how ready you are to support ABM at scale, some of the use cases that come out of that could be, do you have the ability to support effective target account selection? Do you have the ability to effectively segment by customer versus prospect account? And can you show technologies that are used by that particular company, for example? Do you support account-based personalization? Can we augment the data with additional firmographic data? Or do you measure on the effectiveness of your ABM program? All of these can become use cases that you can measure against when you're doing your audit. When we're looking at a data audit, there are many different things you can look at, but some example use cases are, what's the current state of health? So is it well structured? Is it, are we comfortable with the way it works? Do you have 20 different country fields, for example, or those types of questions? What's the quality? So is the data useful? Is it relevant? What's the completeness? What's the count? And what's the proportion of records containing values for a particular field, for example? What's the level of completeness for each of the individual field? How is it integrated? So what are the data flows looking like, both with internal tools, but also third-party tools? And ultimately, again, you want to turn that into a roadmap, just like everything else. So what are some of the guiding principles when you want to start auditing your technology stack? Think about capability over system features. No one cares about having a list of all the system features of every bit of technology that's in your stack. If they're not effectively deployed, if they're not used, or if they are not relevant to you, then what's the point? It's about the capabilities that you have as a marketing function as a result of it all. And that goes beyond the tool itself. It's about individuals being enabled to operate those tools and ultimately the contribution it makes to the bottom line. Relevance over completeness. So a marketing stack is not a bingo card. There are no prizes for a complete set. So make sure the kit you operate creates value for your organization. Business impact over personal preferences. This goes back to identifying objectives. So this is equally true for selecting technology, for example. It's important to have a process of assessing and of selecting your tools. That avoid an organization being taken hostage by what individuals are comfortable with or are curious about, and that includes you. So you want to guard the organization against your own preferences, and think about the future state over the status quo. So don't forget, it should be about the future. Don't purely make this an exercise of documenting your current stack and optimizing and improving it. Think about where you want to be as a business in a year's time, and what do you need your technology to do then? The world is moving and we cannot sit still. So where do we start? We talked a little bit about the fact that you need to identify stakeholders, agree objectives, and so on. But before that, there is a bit of groundwork you can already do that could save you some time. And some of this might be super obvious, but I will mention it anyway. So first of all, which team has the responsibility of the overall stack architecture? Is that you or someone else? Are you doing the stack audit on behalf of people owning the technology, or is it a different group of colleagues? If you happen not to be one of the owners, involve them early to avoid getting on the wrong side. Is there a designated data steward within marketing? Especially when you're looking at data strategy and compliance, this is really important. But to be honest, this is important in any case. If the role exists, it will likely mean a lot of knowledge is already in their head, and that can save you a lot of time. So technology stack, is there a repository of technologies that marketing is responsible for? In our experience, this is very often not the case. And in that case, you have to create one from scratch. But if it does exist, you can use that as a starting point. It will save you a lot of time. And then the question is it useful? So are business owners assigned within this document? Are the data flows documented, and so on? The company initiative. So when you're identifying your objectives, make sure you are clear on what the company-wide initiatives are that are driving the desire to revisit your tech stack. I think that's, it might be that it's not clearly communicated, but before you start anything, make sure that you understand it very, very well. Are there perceived challenges within your technology stack that we need to focus on? So you need to be careful with anecdotal information, but at the same time, it is a good idea to find out what other people's frustrations are. Marketing strategy. So this is kind of connected to company initiatives. What is your go-to-market strategy, and what will it be over the next year? Are there perceived gaps within your tech stack to support your strategy? That was it for today. I hope this was useful to you all. If you're starting on an audit of a particular marketing automation system, we do have templates I can share with you. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out on email or LinkedIn. This was already the 4th installment of MOps Unlocked. We will be sending you the recording so you can share them with your friends and colleagues, and look out for the invite on the next episode of our series. Thanks again for joining, and have a great day.